All right. Hello. So a while ago, I said uh, that I was going to use social media as a way to hold myself more accountable for my goals, and I was planning on posting regularly about what my goals were and how that was going. And then very quickly, I stopped doing that. Not because I gave up on my goals or anything like that, but because I didn't become a habit to be posting. I rarely use social media, but to an extent, I did fall off the horse, and I wanted to find out what I could do to stick to my goals, basically. So I started doing a lot of research, and I was looking into a book. There's actually a free book by Tony Robbins, who is a big like motivational speaker. He's a life coach. And the book is called Reawaken the Giant Within. And it's a condensed version of a bigger book, which I forget what the name of it was. So I've been reading that, and he talks about how basically everything that a person does, they do to change the way they feel ultimately. So you might say you want money, okay, but why do you want money? That's just a means to an end. The end is gonna give you a sense of freedom or power or whatever. What dictates how we feel about certain things, like the steps to achieve something, is our values and uh, the rules that we set up for ourselves to when that value is met. For example, let's say you value a sense of pride, and the rule is you will feel pride whenever you beat an old record of yours, something like that. When people have trouble is when there are conflicting values, because there's what he calls moving away values and moving towards values. I like to just call them values and anti-values because it's shorter to say and it makes more sense to me. But basically, the anti-values would be things you don't want to feel that you want to avoid. So, like feeling angry, depressed. Your anti-values could conflict with your values, or your values could conflict with other values, because people will place different values and different levels of importance. So, like, just an example, if and if he uses this in his book, if somebody asks you to go skydiving, and your top anti-value is fear, then obviously you're not gonna go. But if one of your other anti-values is the being rejected, and that's higher up on your list than fear, then you would go despite your fear. So, let's say you value uh, freedom and security, and they're pretty high up. In fact, they're right next to each other. Well, they're a bit of a contradiction to feel secure in one spot and also to have the freedom to do whatever you want and be out doing stuff. So by rearranging your values in a way that they don't conflict, then it would make things a lot easier, and you would have less trouble making decisions. All this being said, I thought, okay, this all sounds well and great. If your beliefs are what dictate pretty much everything about you, what you do, what you think, what you say, and all you have to do is change your beliefs, okay, that sounds great, but how do you change your beliefs and really believe them, like down in your core, because I remember I was seeing somewhere else that the more like in front you go to your brain, that's like the higher forms of like consciousness, and it takes more energy to be there. And the lower you go, the more automatic it is, and the less energy it takes to make decisions based off of that. So, for example, the brainstem is responsible for the most basic things you need to live. Like, I think it's responsible for breathing, and above that, I think, is the cerebellum, which is responsible for motor function. So the frontal lobe is, like, I think responsible for like consciousness, or at least for like more like abstract thinking and like more complex thinking, right? What I feel like, I can change and rearrange my beliefs all I want up here in the frontal lobe, but how do I really believe it down, like, to my nervous system, down to where, like, for example, let's say that somebody believes they value human life above everything and they will do anything to help someone else. The way that you really test if that's something they believe down in their core is have them walking next to somebody down the street and a car is careening towards them. Do they just jump out of the way, or do they think, oh, I need to take this guy, get this guy out of the path of the car too with me? Like, it's a immediate response based on an instinct, because that's ingrained in your, like, deep down in your nervous system. So, like, how do I make decisions automatically like that based on values that I want to follow? And he talked about something called NLP, which is short for neuro linguistic programming. He said that he used those methods from that in his teachings, but he didn't really go into what it was. So I did research on that. By the sound of it, because Tony Robbins, he had said that he had cured a person's phobia of snakes using NLP techniques in 15 minutes. And I thought, really? That sounds pretty incredible. And then I didn't see it, but there's a video on YouTube where it says Tony Robbins cures a woman's depression in 8 minutes. And I thought, well, if he's using NLP to do this, then I better learn what it's about so I can reprogram myself, so to speak. What it sounds like, at least, is like, you do a few psychological tricks and go beep, boop, boop, and then you're reprogramming your brain quickly. And suddenly you don't have that problem that you had before. But when I went to do the research on what it was and how to use it, it was things that kind of just make sense. For example, what it is conditioning and association. So, for example, one of the NLP techniques that you can use is called anchoring, which is just a trigger or an association where, let's say, you feel super happy and you start doing something like a certain hand motion, like Tony Robbins. I don't know what the anchor is for, but something he does is he takes both hands to his chest and he does that. And I don't know what it's supposed to trigger, but let's say whenever I feel happy, I start doing that. And so I start associating the happiness with that hand gesture. And so if I ever feel down, I can just do that anchor and it'll change my mood. So it's not something that you can program into yourself right away. And this is kind of the bit that I've been like struggling with. Like, people, I will go read advice and stuff online or whatever, and it says do this and do that, but I would never be able to stick to it. And I thought, okay, well, what's the difference? Like, what? I'm slightly out of breath right now. I guess talking while walking briskly. It's kind of warm out too, but I was like, damn it, I want to go walking again. I feel like I've made important discoveries and want to share them. And plus, I haven't gone out of the house or exercised in the past couple of days. What was I even talking about? Oh, yeah. So, how do I know I have all the knowledge because of the things I've read, but, like, even if I try to apply them, I just don't seem to stick to them. So I thought, where is the difference between the people who stick to them and the people who don't? And I thought there was something, like, pretty much like a magic bullet of changing some kind of way that you think, because, like, kind of going back to the value thing, like, how do I really change it, like, deep inside, like, and it seems like, according to what I've read, the conclusion that I'm getting to is just a matter of repetition, because it seems like people are merely an how do you say that word? Amalgamation, when it's a bunch of stuff put together, an amalgamation of repetition. Like, The only reason why somebody believes in something is because they have been conditioned by their environment and by their own thoughts about the environment around them, and they've done it so many times. So, like for example, a Christian who will not denounce the existence of God no matter what. The only reason why they believe in God so much is because since they were kids, the parents told them so over and over and over again. The church told them so. Their Christian friends told them so. And they decided to think God exists or whatever, God is good. It's easy once you start, at least when you get an idea in your head and you kind of believe it, if something happens, you start interpreting it through that lens and start to reaffirm it. So, like, let's say something good happens. Someone who doesn't believe in God might think, oh, that was a lucky thing. But then a person who has the notion that God exists is like, oh, this is a thing that God does. He does, like, miracles every once in a while. So, like, it's a miracle. And then, like, so that kind of reaffirms your belief because you're kind of already looking for that. So everyone's pretty much a blank slate. Like, I'm aware that some people have genetic predispositions for certain things, but like the analogy that I kind of made was when you're picking a character in Skyrim, you can pick an orc, an elf, a human, and each of them have an ability, and then they have a certain skill that will level up more quickly. Like, for example, the elves are good with archery and magic, but you can make an orc character who's supposed to be good with blacksmithing and combat, and you can make a mage based on the decisions you make. So even though you have that genetic predisposition, you can make decisions that have nothing to do with that and become something completely different. So in essence, despite any genetic predispositions you might have, you were a blank slate when you were born, and through conditioning, through your environment and the meaning that you gave to the events in your environment, you condition yourself to be the person you are right now. And if that's the case, in order to change, you need to recondition yourself by identifying the things that you want to change and breaking that cycle, and then inserting a new behavior, a new cycle in there. And in the beginning I thought, like, well,
for some reason the recording on my phone did not save. It was probably because it's hot outside. My phone was overheating and it just like lost the video. But I was getting to the point towards the end there where basically I figured out that the key to changing behavior is just simple repetition. But the reason why that works, how do I explain this? So there's a concept called cognitive dissonance, and what this is if you think something that doesn't match with what you're doing, or if you're doing something that doesn't match with what you're thinking, it creates cognitive dissonance, and your mind doesn't like that. It doesn't like the inconsistency. If you're doing something that's different from what you're thinking, eventually you will change the way you think so that it's in accordance with what you're doing, or vice versa. A really good example of this is Vietnamese POWs who were captured, and they wouldn't torture them. In fact, they would speak very nicely to them and offer them some cigarettes. And after several hours, they would ask them to do something simple like say, America isn't perfect, or communism has a few good points. I guess because they had nothing to lose and they had been in a cell for a really long time or whatever, they were like, okay, I'll just go along. It seemed harmless. That would move on to something that took more effort, like stating reasons why America wasn't perfect, or what were the good points of communism. And they would write out these essays, and then they would read the essays into an intercom, and all the prisoners and all the soldiers would hear what this person wrote, and they would say, this is the person who wrote it. And when other prisoners would ask, like, why did you write that, they couldn't say, oh, they tortured me to say that. They did it pretty much out of their own free will, and to not be like hypocrites to themselves, like they would find themselves defending what they wrote. So once they started backing up what they wrote, they started to believe that they stood behind that. They started helping the communists complete certain tasks towards the war effort, until eventually they denounced their country and became communists and started fighting for the other side. So that's all because of cognitive dissonance. And I think the same principle applies to changing behaviors. When I was depressed and I felt like I finally got out of that, it was because of a motto that I came up with. I would tell myself, it doesn't have to make sense. And what I meant by that was, I thought before that I wasn't good enough based on my experience, and to tell myself anything different would be a lie. In therapy, we got to the point where we kind of came to the conclusion of, well, that's not doing you any good, because you have things you want to accomplish, but thinking that way is keeping you from doing that. So what good does it do? And I'm like, okay, well, if I need to start not thinking that way, that's cognitively dissonant from what I believe, which is that I am, those things. So I came up with the motto, it doesn't have to make sense. If it doesn't make sense to not call myself things, and to say that I am a capable person or whatever, then if it's helpful, then that's the only thing that matters. If it makes me feel better, that's the only thing that matters. It doesn't have to make sense that it goes against what I believe. And eventually, not even eventually, it was pretty quick after I kind of made that discovery, actually. I just stopped having those kinds of thoughts because I knew this is going to make me feel this way, and it's not going to help me do anything. After that, I wasn't able to apply the same logic to other things like anxiety, and I felt like, okay, I got that down. Now how do I do this other thing? And what my therapist said was, it's the same thing, because anxiety and depression are almost the same thing. They come like hand in hand, but I didn't find a way to apply it to anxiety, and I felt like I was missing something. But looking at this book has kind of given me ways to combat that in a way where I can use that same motto. So for example, one of the big things in the book was identity. What you say you are. Like you will act in accordance to what you believe, and if you believe that you're a fun-loving person, then you're gonna behave, in a loving way. So one of the anxieties that I have when I'm meeting new people is like, I don't have social skills and I'm gonna screw it up, and they're gonna think badly of me. But if I were to believe that I'm a likable and sociable person, then I would be able to behave in a likable and sociable way. And I would have to use that mentality of, it doesn't have to make sense, because I don't think that I am, but if I think it anyway, even though it doesn't make sense, it will help me. So this is basically the main point of this whole thing, this conclusion. It doesn't have to make sense, because I have to keep thinking this way to eventually change the way that I act. And even though there's going to be resistance in the beginning from my own mind, I have to keep sticking to it, even though it doesn't make sense to me at first. And it'll create the domino effect eventually, and it'll get easier and easier. So yeah, that's kind of the conclusion that I've come to, the revelation. So now I just need to start focusing on what do I want to change first. So like when I did that live video on Facebook, I said I wanted to become a better vocalist, start going to the gym more often, and I said something else that I can't remember. But I need to start focusing on one thing at a time, maybe two. I think 3 might not even be a good idea. It kind of depends. I need to see. One big anxiety of mine actually is that I'm not gonna have all the time that I need to accomplish all the things that I want to do in life. before I die. When I think of all the different things that I want to do and the amount of time there is during the day to work towards those things, like I get anxiety of like I'm never gonna finish any of these things. So to try to help me out, I did some math. According to, I forgot what the name of the book was, but it's like written by the expert on expertise. He says that it takes 1,000 hours of focused practice to become a master on anything. So I did the math. If you were to practice every day for about 2 hours and 45 minutes, you would become a master in that thing in a year. And I thought that sounded pretty good. Like, how many skills do I need to accomplish the things I want to do? You know, I gotta sing well, play the guitar, play the bass, maybe play the drums. I'm gonna keep that one down because I could use drum samples. Get good at mixing, get good at drawing for my other things, get good at writing. I don't have to and I don't want to get good at video game programming, but I want to learn how to make games. I guess like learning how to use Unreal Engine, which doesn't use any program, is a skill. So like, let's say learn how to use Unreal Engine. So far, that's seven years. There's probably some more things that I want to do. I'll learn different languages and stuff, but that's probably the main thing. So 7 years, and I'm 23. So by the time I'm 30, let's say, I will have learned all these different things, and I will have set up the foundation to make all the music that I want, write all the things that I want, draw all the things that I want, you know, etc. And I thought, okay, that actually sounds pretty good, considering that people usually live up to like what, 80. So like that gives me like another 50 years to do all that stuff. So then it just comes down to a matter of what I want to focus on. Probably two things. So it's kind of like a full-time job, like focusing on one thing for 3 hours and focusing on another thing for 3 hours. So that's like 6 hours, and then the rest of the time I take care of other things. But yeah, that's kind of the gist of it. One of the ways that you can try to break a cycle is by doing a 30-day challenge. So like I saw some videos from a channel on YouTube called Wheezy Waiter, and he does a lot of 30-day challenges where he quits sugar or quits the internet or tries veganism for like 30 days, and he just kind of sees what happens. And I thought it was a really cool idea and something that I could use social media for, to kind of log what I do, what my progress, and like what I think of stuff going on during those 30 days, or make a video of it or something, I don't know. So that's a thing that I can try to make like new habits. Give me a couple more days to solidify the things that I want to focus on, and after that, and I will be focusing on one thing, maybe two things at a time. It's gonna have to be a trial and error thing, you know? If I want to reduce my anxiety about how much time things are going to take, I need to be okay with trying something out for a certain amount of time and seeing that it doesn't work, and then trying something else and just keep on doing that trial and error until I find what works, and not be worried about wasting the time that it took doing something that didn't work. So I'm gonna try one or two things for now and then see what happens, and then I might be able to add more things. But yeah, that's the plan. Coolio. I'll see you guys later. I'm bad at ending videos. I shouldn't even say that, because that's negative language. I currently do not possess the neural pathways in order to come up with ways to end videos quickly and efficiently. Yeah.